have some ideas for the X-Men in the MCU. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Turnout. I'm your host Aloy. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at The Turnout USAA. So now that Phase 3 is almost done for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we have one more movie, and that's going to be Spider-Man Far From Home. There have been a lot of talks about what the future holds for all of these new properties that Marvel has acquired from Fox. One of them being the X-Men. And I've come up with a few different ways that they could introduce the X-Men into the MCU using a lot of what has already been laid as really foundational groundwork already. Before I get into my 3 ways, if you like these videos we've been making, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification so you always know when the Turnout releases a new video. Also check out our website, usaaudiences.com, for movie screening and special event invites. Method number 1, Inhumans versus Mutants. So I know what you're saying. Hey Aloy, the Inhumans was a flop, it was a failure. It kinda was, it didn't do very well. However, the Inhumans have unofficially held a spot that mutants have held for such a long time in the comics. The Inhumans held that, though, in the MCU. I myself, despite the issues with the Inhumans television show, was able to enjoy some of my favorite comic book characters finally coming to life on the screen. Black Bolt, Medusa, Lockjaw, so many great characters were introduced in this TV show. And there's already rumors that a Ms. Marvel movie is coming, so the Inhumans aren't going anywhere. Especially since Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has already done a lot of the legwork in making them an official part of the MCU. Now, if you look at the comics, the Terrigen Mists that are actually creating a lot of the Inhumans is actually something that can kill mutants. So similar to the comic book storyline, the writers in the Marvel Cinematic Universe could always have a mutant with the ability to transport to other dimensions. And perhaps they took a lot of the more prominent mutants with them. This would also allow them to use a lot of the younger versions of some of the X-Men, such as the young Jean Grey, the young Iceman, that have been more prominent in the comics as of late, rather than the classic versions that everybody knows and loves. This would actually allow them to do a lot more with the characters and try and explore a little bit of different themes with them. The cool thing that they can do with this as well is they can use Rogue as a gateway. In the comics, Rogue was one of the few mutants who stuck around as the Inhumans were rising up. The reason why? She could touch an Inhuman and become immune to the Terrigen Mists. Pretty clever way to use her powers. Now, of course, this would be a really fun way to introduce Rogue, especially now that we have Captain Marvel. The Rogue that we've seen in movies so far has just been a mutant who can drain powers. However, in the comics, she gained her super strength and her flight from a run-in with Captain Marvel, who I believe was Ms. Marvel at the time. The second Captain Marvel movie could possibly be an amazing way to bridge that gap, using Rogue as a way to bring other mutants to the forefront in the setting. And I think that that might be a really clever way for them to handle it. And maybe they can take another crack at the Inhumans. One possible obstacle for using a lot of the groundwork in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Inhumans is that the TV MCU and the movie MCU have been kind of separate since its inception. Whereas the TV shows are kind of bound to respect what's happening in the movies altogether can mostly ignore what happens on TV. So they would definitely have to change up the relationship between the two media before they were able to use that method. Method number 2 would just be another origin story. Now I know this is probably not the way that anybody wants them to do it. However, with a group such as X-Men with so many characters, this might be the only way that we can really pay homage to each character individually, would be just to introduce them as their own thing that has been hiding for so long. You know, that's kind of the thing about Xavier's plan. He wanted the mutants to hide until they knew how to master their powers good enough that they could then finally reveal themselves to the world. And why not use this in the MCU? Now that the Avengers have fought back all of these terrible things, maybe now is the time that the mutants are finally confident enough to come out and make themselves known. If there are men with robot suits flying around, and there are giant green guys destroying buildings, and hell, if there are cosmic beings who can destroy spaceships just by flying through them, surely the world isn't gonna look down on a guy who shoots concussive beams from his eyes, right? Again, not necessarily my favorite way to introduce them, but I also feel like it would be the way that they could pay the most respect to these characters that we know and love in the X-Men. The third method of bringing the mutants into the MCU, Days of Future Past. Now here's the thing about Days of Future Past. It's all about mutants in the future coming back to warn the mutants of the past that they need to change certain things in order for an apocalyptic future to not occur. Now the greatest thing about that is that now that time travel and the multiverse has been introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this makes a character such as Bishop super important to this type of approach. If they had a character such as Bishop come back from the future, he could have a run-in with the Avengers or whichever hero which best would fit Bishop coming back and helping to free mutants. But it could already be a thing in the MCU that the world governments already have internment camps full of mutants that they've been discovering, possibly even alongside some of the Inhumans. But using a Days of Future Past motif could work, obviously slightly skewed to fit the MCU a little bit stronger. And I really love Bishop as possibly being a hero in this type of storyline. Again, now that the movies have introduced time travel, they weren't able to do it before, but just think about it so far in the future. Definitely somebody's gonna wanna use that technology to come back and change the past, whether it's suggested or not. And it could be as a result of the exact tampering that the Avengers did in Endgame that created this post-apocalyptic alternate future that the X-Men are destined to stop. So those are my three methods on how they could introduce the X-Men. I want to know what you guys think. Which of my three ways would you choose, or do you have a new way? Let me know. Again, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at the Turnout USAA and check out usaaudiences.com. But other than that, I'm your host, Aloy. This has been The Turnout. Thanks for showing up.